This one is in here.
Oh,
Here.
yeah, went down by the north. Yeah.
I call the meeting of the May 10th Lane Community College Budget Committee to order. And the first order of business is land recognition statement. And Celine, can you? Oh, absolutely. There's a roll call first. Okay. Celia, roll call. Then Celine.
Hillary Kittleson,
Here.
Sue Fahey,
Here.
Holly Shaper. Here. Ian Winbrock. Ian Winbrock. Celine Swenson Harris. Here. Kevin Matthews. Kevin Matthews. Siobhan Cancel. Here. Rosie Pryor. Steve Mattel. Lisa Fragola.
Here.
Holly Johnson.
Present.
Angela Van Kraus.
Present.
Austin Foldnaghi.
Here.
Mike Eister.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Celine, would you please read the statement?
Absolutely. I'd like to start our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on is the traditional homelands of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this very land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted and destroyed. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya.
Thank you, Celine. The next order of business is to approve the minutes of May 3rd. And I had submitted some changes to amendments to the minutes that were posted on board docs this afternoon. So are there any questions or discussion?
I just make a motion to approve the minutes with the amendments.
Second. It's been approved, motioned and second to approve the May 3rd minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor, please, roll call the roll.
Hillary Kittleson.
Yes.
Sue Fahey.
Yes.
Holly Shaper.
Yes.
Ian Winbrock. Celine Swenson Harris.
Yes.
Kevin Matthews. Siobhan Cancel.
Yes.
Rosie Pryor. Steve Mattel. Lisa Fragola.
Yes.
Holly Johnson.
Yes.
Angela Van Kraus.
Aye.
Austin Foldnaghi.
Yes.
Mike Eister.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The next item is public comment. And as I understand it, are there any virtual? So then Celia, can you please? Yeah. And
First is Patrick Blaine.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Blaine. I'm the Associate Vice President here for Academic Affairs and Institutional Effectiveness. And so the main areas that I oversee are curriculum assessment. I, up until very recently, was doing grants development, institutional research, institutional effectiveness, and planning. And I'm here to speak in favor of the college's revised budget. That is because I believe that the assumptions upon which it's based, particularly enrollment, are reasonable. And I also believe that we need to maintain the progress that we have been making recently in retention and recruitment efforts. And we need the support to be able to do that. So we've seen an uptick in the winter and spring quarters in enrollment. Spring quarter was roughly 7.5% up year to year. The I think I said winter. Winter was 7.5% up year to year. Spring was is currently up 5% year to year. And we're seeing the same trend across a lot of the community colleges in the state. We just had a meeting in Salem, and it really looks like a statewide trend where enrollment is starting to rebound from pandemic lows. That points to I think, at least for myself, feeling more comfortable that we'll be able to maintain that trend Our fall 22 enrollment was roughly flat. It was pretty close to flat. And so it is very realistic, I think, to believe that we will be able to hit a 5% increase year to year. If those efforts in retention and recruitment are maintained. A lot of our increase over the winter and the spring has been in new students. And so we can really see that we're attracting a lot of new students to the institution, but we need to keep doing that. And it will also require a lot of work on the student affairs side. That requires that area to be properly funded. Faculty will need to do a lot of work as well to keep our students here with us. And so overall, looking overall at the budget and the funding levels, to me, it represents judicious and measured investments in LCC's future success. We need at this point to maintain our momentum and to keep moving forward. I really don't believe personally that austerity of any sort will help at this point. We need to maintain our momentum and increase our student body, increase our enrollment size, and keep the students that we have here with us. Thank you.
Adrian Mitchell.
Good evening, members of the board and budget committee. My name is Adrienne Mitchell. I serve as the president of the faculty union at LCC. Just briefly, I have a couple of, a couple of comments. First, we appreciated seeing the note in board documents with all of the responses to the budget committee members, including the note that the board will hold an action item vote on the health clinic at a future date, and it would be most wonderful to know when that date will be. And also, I wanted to express appreciation for all of you on the board and budget committee and administration working over the past week on all of these questions and revisions. You heard from the leaders of LCCEF, all of the officers of LCCEA, and all of the officers of the Student Government Association last week. And I feel that you heard us and that you listened, and really appreciate the time and effort that have gone into looking at some revisions. And the revisions seem reasonable. So thank you very much.
Grant Matthews.
Good evening, members of the Budget Committee and members of the board. My name is Grant Matthews. I'm the Associate Vice President for Career Technical Education and Workforce Development here at Lane within Academic Affairs. I have to say that one of my favorite things in this job is the opportunity that I have often to walk around campus and to visit many of the programs and the labs and the shops that we have, and to speak with the faculty and classified professionals that are in those areas about the challenges that they face, and hear about the exciting things that they are doing with our students and the exciting projects that they're working on. While I'm out talking to them, we frequently talk about the need to invest in our programs to continue to meet the workforce, transfer, industry, and student needs that we have. We frequently talk about investments like advertising, recruitment, hard to fill faculty positions, and sufficient classified professionals to support, and other ways that we might be able to ensure that our programs maintain the excellence we know our community expects. I have especially enjoyed lately, as I go around, hearing the excitement from program faculty and leaders as they see student enrollments increase steadily and anticipate even greater program demand next year and over the next several years. Some of our programs, like the Professional Pilot Program, are already at capacity for next year. This is for the first time in many years. I appreciate that the proposed budget takes a forward look and allows us to invest in critical areas, such as filling long-time temporary faculty positions in dental hygiene with permanent faculty capacity, while still beginning to address our long-term fiscal responsibilities. It is important that while balancing the budget, we are both investing resources into areas of growth and being fiscally responsible. I recognize that it is difficult, extremely difficult, to craft a budget that addresses all the challenges that we face. especially when state funding fails to recognize through adequate funding the vital contribution community colleges like Lane make to the community, the economy, and our students. I am confident that this budget strikes the balance that will help us be responsible fiscal stewards while also funding the necessary innovation and student growth we know is part of our mission to accomplish. Thank you.
Shelley Tinkham.
Good evening, President Bulger and committee members. I am reading this letter on behalf of a faculty member, Joshua Reichert, the director of the Lane Aviation Academy. He cannot be here today. He is interviewing pilots at 5,000 feet. So he is indisposed. Dear President Bulger and esteemed Budget Committee members, I am grateful for the opportunity to address you today in my various capacities as a distinguished Lane graduate, veteran, former financial institution automation expert, past faculty member, director of Lane Aviation Academy, a Lane parent, and recently appointed member of the Budget Development Subcommittee. Please note that the views expressed in this letter are solely my own and do not represent any other individuals or groups. During the last meeting, I was surprised by the feedback on the administration's budget. The fervent and somber tone suggested that approving the proposed administrative budget would have severe consequences, akin to those resulting from program closures and layoffs. However, upon comparing the proposed budgets, I do not perceive the same level of urgency. I empathize with my colleagues' frustrations when their hard work on a proposal does not come to fruition. As a leader, I recognize the importance of acknowledging such efforts and assuring contributors that their suggestions were considered. Nonetheless, it is crucial to remember that the Budget Development Committee is an advisory body without authoritative power. In my view, the committee currently lacks a long-term strategic priority plan for budget planning, which can be attributed to a recent significant changes in leadership. If the college's proposed budget was substantially misaligned or contradictory to the Budget Development Subcommittee's recommendations without proper representation to the board, I would expect and potentially share concerns. However, this does not seem to be the case. As the director and a BDS member, my primary concerns lie with Funds 1 and 9. I encourage the board to carefully examine the numbers and make a decision that benefits the institution as a whole. While I understand that the BDS proposal was not chosen to proceed, I do not observe any major differences that would warrant such strong resistance. My concern is that Lane may be succumbing to a partisan political environment similar to what we witness in Washington, where budgets can be obstructed due to governance and partisan disputes rather than actual budgetary concerns. I appreciate your time and attention to this matter. Sincerely, Joshua Reichert, Director of the Lane Aviation Academy.
Brett Roulette.
Start my timer here. There we go. Good evening, Chair Kittleson, members of the Budget Committee, President Bulger. My name is Brett Roulette. I'm Executive Director of External Affairs, and I just wanted to touch on two of the adjustments that you'll see in the revised budget before you this evening. First, the bad news, state funding. State funding in the revised budget has been reduced slightly, and that's because we are currently using the co-chairs of Ways and Means budgetary framework that was released. We are hearing rumors out of Salem. I would love if people heard other rumors, but the rumors we're hearing right now is to expect bad news next week. Next Wednesday is when the revenue forecast in Salem comes out. And oftentimes revenue forecasts in Oregon mirror what our colleagues to the south are experiencing in California, and their most recent monthly revenue forecast was down significantly. So we are expecting to hear some news next week that revenue in Oregon will be down as much as $500 million. So while we don't think it's very likely that we'll see additional revenue, we are hoping that we'll be able to hold our ground with the funding level that was proposed by the budget leaders of the Ways and Means Committee. So you'll see a very brief correction there to we now have state funding penciled in at $744.9 million. The good news, I wanted to end with some better news, is the employee retention tax credit, some federal assistance out of DC. Our board members are familiar with that tax credit because there's been some discussion at the board meetings, but it's basically a tax credit available to employers that retained employees during the pandemic. And the college has been in conversations with our consultant who is helping us through the process. It's a very complex application process. Synergy Partners is the consultant, and they have predicted that the college should be able to receive somewhere between $2.25 and $2.5 million in the form of a tax credit. Now, keep in mind that this is a one-time funding, so it will help us out in next year's budget, but it won't be available in years following. So there's some good news there, but it will be one-time funding. Also, we do have to pay the consultants a little bit. So we estimate that after we pay the folks that help us out, that we should be able to expect somewhere between 1.96 and $2.2 million. So you'll see in the revised budget that we have that tax credit factored in for $2 million. So those were the two things that I wanted to bring to your attention before you got into the meat of the meeting here. But thank you very much for your time and attention. I appreciate all you do.
It looks like there are no more people wanting to testify, so I'm going to close the public hearing. The next item of business is responses to information requests, and I believe that's going to be in the form of revised forecast. And President Bolger, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you very, very much. We certainly appreciate all the patience of the budget committee on the revision that we've shared with you. As you can tell, we were burning midnight oil and getting this information to you, but as quickly and as accurately as possible. We have made many corrections, and we have also changed this budget quite a bit. And I want to just frame that a little bit for you. This budget, I am incredibly confident and positive about this particular budget. This budget is bold, it's aggressive, and it's actually why I think I was hired by the Board of Education. So you may know that I am a new president here, been here since July 1 of last year. When I came in, we were looking at fall enrollment numbers, and they were projected to be double-digit in declines. This institution has had more than a decade of declines in enrollment, as you may recall. I said, well, I think this is going in the wrong direction. And so we started an enrollment campaign, and that enrollment campaign allowed us to have a more modest decline in fall, an increase in winter, an increase in spring. What those have done to the institution has been incredible, because the institution, even though we know we need to get to next year to have continued momentum and the following year before a lot of people will have that confidence. But what it's done to the inside the institution is to boost the confidence, boost the motivation, and be inspiring for the future. So what we'd like to do is walk through the Lane Community College. It's called General Fund 1 year-over-year projection. We'd like to walk through that for the budget committee before we have you open it up for discussion. So thank you very much. One of the changes that you'll see at the very, very top of this budget projection is that we are now projecting a 5% increase in credit hours, a 5% increase in credit hours. And as you look to the out years, that will be fiscal year 25, 26, and 27, we're factoring those kinds of enrollment increases in those out years as well.
Excuse me,
Yes.
would it be okay if people asked questions as you go?
Yes.
Okay, so if as the presentation is being made, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you.
Actually, I'll just a brief comment. Thank you, by the way, for revising that. And I always thought like 2% was really conservative as a forecast, and 5%. I would almost put it as a moderate conservative kind of number. Is that kind of the consideration you're doing with that?
Oh, yes,
Mhm.
yes. I really like to underpromise and overdeliver, which is why we started with the 2% increase.
Mhm.
But we still believe that the 5% increase is reasonable.
Excellent. Thank you. That's the only question I have.
As we move along, we have the adjustment to the state budget number. As you mentioned, I believe in public comment, so it's now $744.9 million. That's an adjustment from the budget that we saw last week. 8% of that, you can see what that number is, the $29.7 million. So that was updated. We also have the enrollment increase.
I had a question about the CCSF. So in one of the responses to the questions, it was noted that this does not take into consideration the performance-based new formulas for CCSF. And you put it at 8% as a realistic number. And so I was wondering, are there some concerns? What I've heard is we're going to get less or a smaller share of the pie based on, that's what it says here too, but based on the new performance-based funding. And so does that mean that what we're actually forecasting is going to be less than?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Just to clarify for everyone, the part of the funding formula, the funding model, the CCSF is performance-based. It's small percentage in the first biennium. It's only going to affect us in the second year of the biennium and not the first year. And it will be half that number. This is designed to ramp up so that it's over 3 bienniums. And it's to ramp up to about 10%, taking off the top, in addition to some other funds that are generally taken off the top. I consulted with our institutional researcher here at the institution to ask if that would have a dramatic impact to us. And the institutional researcher says no, she does not expect it to have a dramatic impact. The reason I think that she has so much credibility here is because we have 3 individuals who are on the rulemaking committee. The rulemaking committee for the CCSF, and then this part of the formula or the model that is going to change. So feel pretty confident that 8% is really good. I would say that the other reason is because of the metrics are consistent. The metrics that are built into this model are really consistent with where we are planning to place our efforts for student retention and also student success.
Thank you.
I have a question about the beginning balance. And it is quite a bit lower than was in the last iteration. So my question is that because you're assuming you're going to spend all of contingency this year?
That is the way I built the worksheet, yes.
But have you spent all of contingency, and do you anticipate in the next 6 weeks? Where are you with that, with the contingency amount?
Currently, I don't know.
So this may be a conservative number is what I'm asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
We are taking a really close look at how Lane has managed the contingency in years past.
Okay.
And we have lots of questions about how Lane has managed the contingency.
Thank you.
And are committed to making sure that there is a contingency.
Okay. Any other questions before we go on? Mike?
I think Holly had requested that we pop up on the screen the document. Are we? Oh, okay.
Okay.
It's being worked on, Holly.
I don't have a PDF.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, and so we are now down to the next area where there are notes. And we have added for the employee retention tax credit, $2 million. In the first budget, in the one from last week, we included $500,000. Again, under promising, over delivering. So we are, given the information that we received from our consultant, and that was probably 2 months ago, roughly, then we have taken it up to the $2 million there. And then you'll see the other notes there.
Susan? Sorry. For the employee retention credit, I think it was a great idea to apply for it. I know it's very difficult for large employers like LCC and needing a consultant to do that. Last month, the IRS said they had 1 million backlogged of the requests for these, and that it was taking about a year for folks to receive funds. And so it just makes me a little nervous that we've included the full 2 million here, knowing how backlogged the IRS is and when we might get those funds, because have we applied for them at all yet?
While ago.
Process,
But
yes.
but it hasn't been applied. We haven't submitted it yet. Is
Not submitted.
yeah, okay. Thank you.
And we were fully aware, thank you so much for the question. We were certainly fully aware that it could take 6 to 12 months to receive the funds after you apply. So I'm certainly not surprised that there is a backlog. We fully expect to receive the monies once the monies are available to us. We fully expect to receive them. As we move on in the budget forecast, the next item, the next note is about the expenditures underneath personnel, that note. And in the note, it says reduction of vacant positions. We wanted to be very clear that this would be a one-time holding of vacant positions in the amount of $1 million.
I have a question.
Sure.
So in our last meeting, you explained really well about how holding positions open results in savings. And that we've always used the word swirl here for that. Am I right? Yeah, okay. I'm seeing some head shaking going on out there. So this amount of reduction of vacant positions, the one-time reduction of vacant positions, is that all reduction of vacant positions, or is that also including swirl? Because if I recall in the answers to the questions, it includes half of it is swirl, half of it is. Am I wrong? I could go back and look at my notes, but
there was a list of positions that we have on hold.
so are those going to be not filled for an entire year? Correct. So 1 million in positions not filled for an entire year. And so then will there also be savings from the swirl?
Possibly, yeah, absolutely. So we are certainly taking the remaining positions. We have people retiring, we have people leaving the institution, moving on to other roles. And sometimes what we do is we will delay hiring. So the position and the cost of that position is in a swirl, is what we call it. And so we intend to do both. But it was impressed upon us last week that we really, as a strategy, needed to make sure that we held vacant positions. And that's what we're doing. It's painful. I want everyone to know that this is incredibly, incredibly painful to the institution. We have in some cases one individual in an area. One individual in the area. This is one of the things that keeps me up at night. Because if something happened to that individual, we may not get that function done. And so we have a very, very thin in terms of personnel, and everyone is really, really critical. And even so, this institution is committed to not only holding positions, but also delaying some positions, delaying the hiring of them.
Can we Can we get an estimate of what the swirl might be built into the budget forecast?
We can certainly take that question. I'm not sure that we have the answer today, but we'll certainly get that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. I guess. Oh,
Austin?
quick question about swirl, because also it's very variable though, because yeah, so for instance, we do get 5% and or more. We would need to, kind of ramp up in certain areas with like hiring and stuff like that. So with swirl, it's kind of very variable. So yeah. So I just wanted to verify with swirling. That sounds weird. That there's also a ramp up option with those positions if enrollments go up.
That's where the flexibility comes.
Yeah.
Is that we are able to have some flexibility within those positions. And at the same time holding positions and really not looking at those positions again for another year.
Any other questions?
I have.
Susan?
Mike, you had your hand up earlier.
Well, I was just going to say that my experience with swirl is that even if you fully intend to fill a position, it might take 6 months.
Yeah.
And then you might decide you're going to hold off for another 2 or 3 months. So it could be both of those things.
Susan?
In the proposed budget document that we received last week, the general fund requirements, a lot of the explanations of budget variances for greater than 10% was vacancies. And I'm not sure how much of the vacancies were already baked into the budget document and how that relates to the additional 1 million that's now salaries are going down in the revision.
And if you need to do research on this, you can bring that back. Because that is one of the critical issues here. So
Definitely like to look at into the figures for the papers and provide you with.
you bet.
That would be great. And thank you for that. And if we could have the vacancies by what's included in the budget document as vacancies by department or a major function area like instructional support, so we can kind of see how that plays out, that would be helpful.
Because we are, I appreciate that because we are a labor environment.
Mhm.
And we'd really like to just give you very high level information.
Mhm. I actually believe it was like around like 44 positions or something like that. That was like kind of outlined in the budgetary process, and that, which I assume that's the number. That's the positions that we're talking about as far as the $1 million reduction, right?
We can.
Oh,
we'd
okay.
like to take
Gotcha.
that back. And
Yeah.
Get you accurate.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Go ahead. You have any more?
Driving. Yes, so that's the note there, and we also wanted to talk about what's in orange also just after that. And Marlene, I'm hoping to get your help on this one. This is a revision of that next item.
The budget office, all along the line, specifically went through the worksheet and discovered that there was an additional 2.1 million that had been included in this in the 14.5 million that was presented. That was an unknown increase. Neither her nor I can find any notations that referenced why that increase was put there. And honestly, I don't know if I did it or someone else did it, but it was a mistake. It shouldn't have been there. We can't justify that figure at all. We went back to our budget database and looked in depth to see if we could justify the 14.5 that was presented. We kept coming up with 2.1 million less. So we made that correction. So that basically was
we were asked last week about an expenditure reduction package and to bring some of those to this committee. We elected not to have a separate document on the expenditure reduction packages because the notation is just so small. And it's in this area. So the expenditure reduction package will probably encompass a bucket of items, largely in this material event services area. And that would could include, my team and I will need to discuss this, but we'll likely include P cards, some operational efficiencies with respect to P cards, travel, subscriptions, that kind of bucket of services. I'd like to end our walkthrough here with the contingency and the ending balance. It's $3 million. Thank you.
So I have a question about that ending fund balance and the we ended the actuals, 22 actuals, we ended the year with $8 million, correct? And it's looking like we're saying we would then end 2024 budget with $3 million. So we're taking reserves down from 8 million to $3 million, which is not a very good number. So my question, or maybe my comment, is I would like for the committee to consider a way of kind of mitigating our risk around enrollment. Because if the enrollment numbers stay static or even just go up a little bit, right now we're budgeting $4 million in enrollment revenue. And that makes me nervous. And we're budgeting $2 million for a grant that might not arrive till late. So we have some factors here, and how can we stay with an aspirational budget and be able to sleep at night? So my proposal would be to create a reserve for revenue shortfall of a certain amount. I don't have an amount. I'm hoping staff would have an amount that is like a second contingency. And that would mean that we would then reduce expenditures by whatever that reserve amount is. And if it looks like enrollment is coming through, or we get news that we have applied and we're very likely to get the money, then the money could be moved out of reserve and back into the operating budget by the board, by supplemental budget. So it's a way of constraining expenditures until you have some confidence in enrollment projections and that sort of thing. And I'm just want to field that conceptually. And I'd like to work on some kind of proposal and ask staff to say, well, how big a reserve should we go? We could go, if we were incredibly conservative, we'd say, oh, no enrollment increase, and they're not going to get the grant, right, till the following year. And that's 6 million. I'm not talking that, but I'm saying somewhere between 2 and 4 million, I think it would be prudent to sequester until you start seeing if enrollment is coming in. Austin, Lisa, Mike, and Kevin.
The contingency, isn't that supposed to be added to it as opposed to, so it seems like there's a subtraction. So shouldn't it be the 3 million of ending balance plus the contingency, which is 2,398,000? So that would be closer to 5 million.
If you don't spend it. But in most organizations, you assume you're going to spend some of it, that it's a contingency, so you may need it. So it's kind of hard to say you're not going to, you don't know whether you're going to spend it or not.
Yeah.
You could, if you don't spend a penny, you're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
You add that.
That is the case here.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa?
I really, well, I want to start first by saying, Sue and Hillary, I appreciate the expertise that you've been bringing to this process. And I appreciate the suggestion. I would be supportive of it. I I have a lot of qualms about reducing our ending fund balance to that level. And part of that is because I wonder how much not to say that we haven't done an exceptional job with recruitment, but we just came out of a pandemic. How much of that surge was from like the world opening up again, right? And I know there's probably no data on that available. If there is, I'd love to see it. But we've really struggled in the past to meet our enrollment increase. And I don't want to base so much of the budget on that. I also have concerns about the economic forecast that's coming, which will mean decreased funding in the future. And the fact that we're not even getting funded at current operating levels by the state is also concerning. So I'm seeing a lot of concerning economic variables at the same time that I have a tremendous amount of confidence in the work Dr. Bulger has been doing. And so I'm also thinking about how do we balance the financial sustainability within this budget. And so I appreciate the suggestion.
Mike and then Kevin.
Thanks. First of all, I'd like to thank the staff for an incredible job of scrambling. We didn't give you very much time. And the multi-page document that has the Q&As on it was very thorough, and the update is much appreciated. And I can only imagine that there were a few hours of sleep lost in putting that together. So I appreciate that. My other point is that I'm reminding myself that we're trying to create a snapshot of a moving picture because we have a deadline that we have to meet before the data that we need is going to be available. And knowing that, I'm reluctant I guess I don't have any problem asking the staff to project a number, but I'm very reluctant to ask the staff to get very specific about where cuts might be made long before we might have to make those cuts, or even knowing that we might not have to make those cuts. And so I want to give the staff a lot of latitude on that. I don't have any problem with a number, but if we start getting specific about it's going to come from here or there, I just don't think that's appropriate for us.
Kevin?
Thank you. I guess I'd like to have another round of really nitty-gritty clarification on the year-ending reserves and the budget overages and underages as we step through these years, because I'm not sure everybody's understanding the numbers the same way right now. And if we could get that, I think that would be really helpful. Before I hear that, on this sheet that has 8 colored columns, and the yellow box in the lower left that summarizes ending reserves, I think there's some kind of little notational mistake there, something that didn't get cleared out. Because we've got in the second row, we've got a $3 million number and a deficit. In the fourth row, the next row, one up from the bottom, we've got the $2.9 million number, which is shown in black without parentheses, but also labeled a deficit. So I think that I'm guessing that word deficit didn't get deleted. But if we could hear those numbers and how they step through so that everybody understands that, I think that would ground our discussion of what we need to do.
First of all, my apologies. We've been burning midnight oil trying to do last minute adjustments on this. It's probably a contingency line. And I overlooked the box on the bottom. So making a quick adjustment, and not having removed the deficit line there. I will make sure that it's fixed and updated, but,
I have another question. That last line in that little yellow box, I'm not sure where that number came from.
that was from it was from the previous, worksheet.
So that's in it, that 7.9, is it just draw a line through that for right now?
Right now, yes, I was. So the deficit, the 3 million that's in a red shows the, estimated 2023, over expenditure figure.
Yes.
And then the 2024 figure that's there is actually pulling from that same line. You'll see 2.9. So it's the revenue over for the new proposed 2024. So those together would make this 7.9. But that, so that doesn't take into consideration the
Contingency, okay. If you could redo that, that would be helpful. Austin?
I do want to also echo what Mike said in regards to like making cuts, in this time period and so forth. Because as a board throughout the year, we make adjustments to the budget all the time, and we adjust to the current conditions, the current environment, changes in the environment, and so forth. So I feel like we have the board dynamics and after this election, we'll have the board dynamics to be able to do that. And I also just trust and also really appreciate the mentality that President Bulger has taken towards this budget and towards this forecast. And I think that, I'm not that necessarily supportive of having budget cut proposals at this point, because I think that there are some good things in this forecast and there's ways that we can adjust appropriately as we go throughout the year as a board. So, anyway.
Mike?
Well, just one last comment to add on to that and my previous comment. I don't have any question that Dr. Bulger fully understands her responsibility to balance the budget.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, this is a matter of timing.
Yeah.
So if we come up short, she's going to come back with another proposal that will balance the budget.
Exactly.
And I think my idea was more to, as you're saying, there's 6 weeks, you've got to do something before you have information. So my idea was, if you create a reserve for revenue shortfall of X million, whatever it is, you have to balance that somewhere in your expenditures. And you can do that by just an across the board cut, knowing that that's all it is a hatchet, but it helps to balance the budget. And it constrains the spending. And I think if you have monthly reports, detailed reports, then you'll be able to monitor that. So that's really where I was coming from. Lisa?
Yeah, to address like the comments that were made about adjusting the budget throughout the year. If we adjust the budget, we have to pass a supplemental budget.
Right.
Yeah.
We have not done that this last year. We have not done that the previous year. We did not do that the previous year. The only time that we pass a supplemental budget is usually right at the end, like we did last week, because of those weird ways the payments come, right? So we don't actually adjust the budget throughout the year. And that is actually something in terms of having a sense of how we're tracking our expenditures in the budget that I would really appreciate, right? So rather than getting all the way through the year and then being like, oh, we overspent over here, we underspent over here. Like it would be, I don't want it monthly, but I would like to have an understanding of it maybe quarterly, or maybe, I don't know what the word is for thirds, tertiaries or something. So the thing about also having a reserve for revenue shortfall is also that I think we should be looking at how we are forecasting our expenditures right now in order to put that reserve aside. And I do think there are some ways that we could do that strategically now. And I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of how that happens, but, you know, for example, I don't see specific swirl savings built into this budget. It's like, we've talked about it. We know it's going to kind of happen, but like, where's the accountability? Like, if we build $500,000 of swirl savings into the budget, then we kind of hold ourselves accountable to doing that. I'm still a little confused on the M&S. I'd love to know, Marlene, maybe for our next meeting, what we actually have spent at this time in fiscal year 23 compared to what we're budgeting for fiscal year 24 and what that, you know, what that looks like. So I appreciate the idea, but I think it holds us accountable at this time, but also allows us to be visionary and move forward. So.
Any other comments? Kevin?
When we were looking at the original proposed budget that had a $4.4 million deficit, you know, we were looking at a situation where we had a year with a substantial deficit and a year with a substantial deficit. And if there was a third year, it would be wiping out the reserves and even going negative. Now we're looking at a budget that has $7 million difference at the end from 4 negative to 3 positive. So, and you know, as long as we're confident this is a real budget, we're looking at a situation where we go from $8 million of ending reserves to $8 million of ending reserves. Now there is the contingency factor, but that's of a somewhat smaller magnitude than the brute deficits accumulating. So my feeling tonight, looking at these revised numbers, that I want to hear, you know, more feedback and from different stakeholders and understand it some more and over the coming week. But as I look at those numbers, it looks to me like that declining, that issue of spending away the reserve, the ending balance reserve, has largely been solved. And if that's credible, then I'm not sure this is the time that we need to go to add special accounting contingent reserves and extra things. I think we need to ensure that this is a real budget and consider whether it has enough flexibility and enough slack built in there already. I think that's what one of the things I'm going to be looking at over the next week.
Can I ask, we got updated pages and I'm curious if you did, does your page what's the number yours has at the very bottom for this single column one?
7,900,000.
Yeah, he didn't get the updated page. The updated page only has 3 million at the bottom.
Okay, well, that's why I was asking for these numbers to be reviewed.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
So maybe that shines a little clarity on it, but I agree with you. Like there's definitely some things I'm not processing clearly as well.
Do we have
the folks at home didn't get any of this update because they were just handed out minutes before the meeting. So
Yep, now I have it.
Oh, got it.
Thank you.
but I need
Folks at home. The folks online.
Dated in board docs, yeah.
any other comments? Lisa?
Yeah, I had another question. Maybe there's a couple of them, but I want to talk about the health clinic.
Mhm.
And so the health clinic is still in this budget in a way that reflects a decision that hasn't been made by the board yet. And just for my own clarity around the budget, somebody mentioned it earlier, I can't remember who, but maybe it was in one of the questions, but the board will be making a decision next week on the health clinic. Is that correct?
There is a special meeting that would involve.
Okay, great. And so I would assume that depending on the outcome of the board's decision, we would have to amend the budget for this piece. The thing I'm wondering about is there a savings to the college in closing the health clinic? Because we're still going to collect the same fee and apply it towards the telehealth expenditure. So is there actually a savings to the college in eliminating the health clinic?
So I wanted to take the first one of the first thoughts that you made. So this budget was built, is my understanding, with the costs of the health clinics that come from the general fund in it. So this budget was built with the costs of the health clinic in it from the general fund. In terms of the what I understand from our team that's taken a look at the potential costs for a telehealth option with some staff services internally to partner with a network of providers in the area that the healthcare services to the students, really a broader range of students than the ones that we're currently serving, who are very, very deserving. They're uninsured, they're international students, very deserving. That it will be able to sustain itself with the student fees.
With the student fees expanded to include all students.
Expanded to include all students, online, hybrid, international. My understanding is that even potentially our non-credit students who are not currently included in that would potentially be included as well.
So the cost that it's expressed in this budget is based on what was being passed through from the general fund, where the fees weren't covering the expenses of the clinic. And then that's what's in this budget.
That's my understanding.
Okay, and so that would be a change.
If the restructuring of healthcare services to our students were approved by the board, then absolutely we could remove that general fund contribution from the budget.
Yep, I think I got it. And then I had another question. I've been doing my homework. I would like more information on Lane Forward. So again, this is what I see as I know it's not a program in the sense that people at the college are accustomed to using the word program. I guess we could use a new initiative or a new service or something like that. And generally, in my experience, when things like that are added to the budget, it's based on information that's been provided to the board, conversations the board has had, and the board has had an opportunity to weigh in on those initiatives. I do think that the board prioritized certain goals with the president, but we've not received information about that or had a conversation about it. So I would really like to have a conversation as a board about things before they are implemented in a budget, because otherwise it feels like we're kind of forced into this scenario where we're making decisions on things under this budget timeline. And so I am curious to have more information about what that's going to go towards. I mean, some of the information that was answered in this question, it felt very broad to me. And it's also different than other explanations I've heard about it. So here it says to support retention, student success, and professional development as an investment in Lane's community and future growth. Those are all great things and all things I support. But I've also heard it was potentially going to go towards campus climate and addressing campus climate issues.
Yes, we'll bring a more full explanation of that. Because I would say actually from my perspective, it's all those things. It's really an investment in the institution and in individuals in the institution working on behalf of the priorities of the institution, and the priorities are actually in all those areas. The priorities this year are physical condition, enrollment, and institutional culture. So the priorities are essentially in all those areas. I'd be happy to bring back more information to the budget committee. This was designed to be more of a catalyst kind of an opportunity for the institution, and it's designed to inspire the institution.
So it is 6 o'clock and we had, but I think we have the ability, there's no meeting afterwards. So I would like to suggest that if there's agreement that we extend for 10 minutes. We have a few more discussion items and we have to determine the next meeting date and the likelihood of that being an adoption date. So Austin, is that agreed? Do I hear any nays on that one? Okay. Austin.
Well, first off, really quick, in regards to the Student Health Center, shout out to our Lane legislative contingency. I hope they can also provide some additional funding resources for the Student Health Center. I've been reached out to certain elected representatives about this, and I hope that they can find some additional funding to support the Student Health Center. Really quick, you mentioned obviously the expansion of it to non-credit and online students in regards to the fee, but that does not include an increase to the fee, like I believe in option 2 that the students voiced in their public comment they were somewhat supportive of. So this would just be the expansion of, which was one of the things that the students spoke positively of, but it does not include the increase in the fee, correct?
We had multiple options. We wanted at least one of the or more of the options. Option 2 and specifically because wanting to reduce the fees.
Got it. Okay.
Overall.
Got it. But expand it out to all the students.
And
Yeah.
by expanding it out to all students.
Exactly.
Any other questions, Susan?
I'd just like to say I'm supportive of a reserve for potential revenue shortfall, in part because the projected revenue for tuition this year compared to what's in the revised budget proposal is an 18% increase in tuition revenue. And that just seems like it's a stretch without having a reserve for it. And also when I look at the answer to question 32 about the percentage of students attempting 36 plus credits, the answer is ultimately we have more students enrolling, but they are enrolling in less credits. So.
Any other comments, questions before we move to schedule? Okay, so we have potentially we could meet next week or the following week. And so I'm wondering about if staff believes they'd be ready to bring the information back and with adoption motions and with some sense of the size of a revenue shortfall and maybe in some alternatives between 2 and 4 million or something like that. So what kind of percentage cuts that would mean for the budget? Any thoughts about whether that's doable next week or just meet in 2 weeks and for the adoption? Yeah.
Next week.
Next week.
We can do that next week. We'll certainly be ready for that.
Okay.
And we're prepared with the motions or we're prepared.
Lisa.
So my understanding is that we are going to have a budget meeting followed by a special meeting, followed by a work session. I'd like to request that we not make a recommendation on this budget until after the board makes a decision on the health clinic.
So if that's the case, we then might be able to just skip next week and move.
I would still, I mean, if we're going to see additional information coming back, I would
We'd rather, okay.
still like to meet
Okay,
next
so
week.
we would, but really keep it right in the time zone and get the information that's been asked for at this meeting and look at some of the reserves scenarios. Okay, so we will meet here next week at 5 p.m. Yes, Shane.
Brett.
Brett, Shane's over there.
It's all right. I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention, our Vice President Tinkham, in her public comment this evening, misidentified Joshua Rickert as a faculty member. I think when she was meaning to mention that he was interviewing faculty at 5,000 feet. Joshua, for the record, is a manager and he's director of the Aviation Academy. So I just wanted to clarify that, put it on the record so there wasn't
Great.
confusion.
Thank you. All right. So with that, we'll meet next week here at 5 o'clock. Meeting is adjourned.